And I'm hoping that this is going to be the missing piece of the puzzle for you. Because if you find yourself having difficulty achieving something, or difficulty with certain relationships, or challenges in life that you just seem to consistently run into, this may be the missing piece of the puzzle. And that is, you can't achieve beyond your self-image. Okay, think about that. You can't achieve beyond your self-image. Now, you may have heard of something called the mirror principle, which is your life is a direct reflection or direct manifestation of the beliefs you hold about yourself, about the way you see the reality for yourself. And so the way it would work is, what you see in front of you has all been created by you based on the beliefs, the limitations or lack of limitations or no limitations that you hold within your database, which is stored within the subconscious memory. Now, I'm not saying this is a good or bad thing, but if you find yourself with reoccurring issues, if you find yourself struggling to achieve something that you've been trying to achieve for quite some time, this may be the video for you. Now, the beliefs we hold about ourselves, how we see ourselves in this world, what we feel that we are entitled to or what we deserve, or what we think we can or can't do, is most of the time linked back to the beliefs we hold about ourselves based on our experiences from childhood. So we've probably heard that from the years of 0 to 7 years old, our brain starts going into this programming state. And what's happening is that we're learning how to function in this world. We're learning how to be in this new place that we're born into and understanding what works, what doesn't, who are the people that we can depend on, how people perceive us. And typically based on those experiences, we form beliefs that get programmed into, stored into our subconscious memory. And so those early years are fundamental for the way that we go about in life moving forward. As I've mentioned in previous videos, I had a lot of fear of my father when I was younger. And I was afraid if I angered him, if I annoyed him, if I did anything to make him upset with me, he might take his love away from me. He might take his protection away from me. And those were beliefs that I created based on my experiences when I was a little boy. Now, fast forwarding 20 years, as I started working in the professional world, I was a sales professional. And what I found is that I was having a lot of difficulty in interacting with, scheduling meetings with, and being authentic with when I was in the presence of, or I was doing business with, an authority figure. All right. And it took me years to understand that that difficulty in dealing with authority figures all translated back to the beliefs that I held about myself with my greatest authority figure, which was my father. So I'm going to share with you what may work for you in the difficulties or in removing that static or removing those blockages that you have to getting to where you want, or at least help you address perhaps the reoccurring challenges that you're having in your life. Now, years ago when I discovered podcasting, I remember listening to a speaker who was talking on abundance, who was talking about living with prosperity. And they talked about the law of attraction and how powerful it is, but they also talked about the missing piece of the law of attraction, which was feeling worthy of attracting that which you desire. And at that point, everything finally made sense to me, because I was having challenges in certain areas, and I didn't realize at that time that those challenges were relating back to the beliefs that I held about myself and what I felt I was worthy of receiving, or what I was even capable of manifesting or producing. So this is how I started to deal with those issues. I started to listen to the internal dialogue that was going on with me. So in instances where, for example, I might have been in an affluent neighborhood and I could really admire what was around me. And of course, this is something that I wanted to aspire to. This is something that I wanted to make part of my reality. But whenever I imagined myself living in one of those homes and being myself and experiencing that as part of my reality, I started to realize all of these counterproductive thoughts and feelings that were coming up. And they were typically feelings of, I'm not wealthy enough, my job doesn't pay me enough, I'm not good enough to live in this neighborhood. And they were all kind of negative beliefs that I was holding towards myself. And at the beginning, when these feelings and emotions were coming up, I used to just ignore them and just, obviously keep on driving and let that go. But what I learned over time is that those were coming up to help me address the voids, obstacles, and shortages that I held about myself. And they played a key role in me finally being able to break that and move forward in life. I also started to take note. I used to journal. Whenever I was feeling inauthentic, whenever I was feeling unworthy, whenever I was feeling like I wasn't good enough or I couldn't achieve something, I started to write that down. I started to write down the types of feelings and emotions that I had. And I started to write down the types of things that were triggering this. And I kept this journal. And that journal was very beneficial for me because it helped me to go back and bring myself back to that point where I was trying to ignore something and maybe run away from something. It gave me a chance to sit down and really focus in on these and understand what was going on with me. When I was using my visualization technique to manifest these, or to help manifest these, as The Secret would say, I was finding that I had a lot of negative beliefs about myself and negative feelings about myself. And so when I tied that back to not being able to achieve past or not being able to manifest something which is beyond my self-image, it all made sense and came together for me. As I would analyze these beliefs and feelings and these assumptions that I had about myself, I was able to look at them now in a way where I wasn't necessarily standing in that fight or flight feeling. And I was able to look at them with a calm mind, and I was able to question them and actually analyze them and see them for the truth or for the lies that they were. And what I was finding is that I actually had a lot more lies and a lot more negative beliefs about myself than were actually true. And so as I was looking at them and questioning them, what that started to do is it started to dissolve that energetic charge that they used to hold over me. And as they dissolved, there was a lot less resistance to me feeling a certain way, feeling better about myself, or feeling good about myself, achieving a certain financial income that I was looking to achieve for that year, or envisioning myself and feeling myself, for example, living in the affluent neighborhood. Things were starting to shift for me. So that was something that I felt that was very, very helpful to me. And if it's something that you've never done, I highly recommend that you do this because it's a very effective way to help you understand how you perceive yourself in the world. And it's a very effective way to help you question those lies that you might hold about yourself. Next, what I started to use was a technique that one of my mentors taught me, and it was essentially doing inner child work. So if we go back to the beginning of the video, I talked about those formative years from 0 to 7, for example, where we started to really program ourselves for the way that we were going to see ourselves in this world and move forward in this world. And I found that there was a lot of clutter, we'll call it, that was created in those formative years that was really holding me back and blocking me, creating a lot of static for where I wanted to go and what I was wanting to achieve. And so this particular method, and you might have heard of it before, and it can go by different names, but what I call it is basically the inner child work that allows you to go deep within yourself and talk to yourself. The way it works is that you get yourself into a state where you're very calm, where you're free of any distractions. If you have a family like I do, I would typically do this at nighttime when everybody else is sleeping. And I would bring the lights down, maybe put some calming music in the background, and I would lay myself down. And what I did was I would bring up those same feelings and emotions and beliefs that I had written down in my journal that were triggers for me, that made me feel less than authentic and less than who I felt I really was. And what I did was I would pretend that I was opening a door as I was laying down. I was opening a door basically in my crown chakra. So let's say I was laying down, the door would be open, And I brought myself into like a small character, almost like a video game. And we'll say like the Super Mario video game. And I entered in through my crown chakra. And as I entered in, I basically entered into my body. And what I was looking for was my younger self who was hurting and suffering and of um, in pain that was relating to me feeling like I wasn't worthy enough to surpass my father's financial income as an example. So what I would do is I would imagine myself walking around basically these dim lit hallways, and where I would see a light coming out of a particular room, for example. So I was envisioning I was going down these hallways, and where there was a light coming out of the room, that was where I identified that my younger self was sitting and who was still in pain. And so I would proceed forward, and as I entered that room, I would typically find myself, my younger self, usually around 6 years old I would be sitting down with my knees crouched up and my head inside my knees and crying and sobbing and feeling very, very down on myself. And so what I do at that moment is now I'm my current day self, the individual who's experienced the world and experienced so much more and has a lot more knowledge and understanding of myself and the world. And I would question my younger self. I would come in like a friend and I would say, Mario, why are you crying? Why do you feel so, why do you feel so negative about yourself? Why do you feel like you're not worthy enough of, say, why do you feel you're not worthy enough of X, whatever it is, whatever one of those beliefs that I wanted to heal? And what the amazing thing for me is that my younger self who was hurting, or basically that emotion and memory that was stored within my subconscious memory, started to talk back to me. And I was able to have dialogue with my younger self. And it was almost as if I was able to go back in time, almost like the movie Back to the Future, to go back in time and correct the belief. So as my current day self was talking to my younger self, I was able to ask questions of my younger self and point out certain facts that was making my younger self who was crying feel a lot better. And usually it was a dialogue almost like a best friend would have with another friend who was in pain and who was hurting. I found that by the end of the dialogue, I would hug my younger self, I would feel better for it, and I could just basically at that point, I would basically come back to reality. And what I found is that as I moved forward in life, those triggers were reduced drastically. And the way I saw that is it was a way for me to go into my database, my subconscious memory, and dissolve those negative energetic memories that are holding so much weight that causes me to freeze up and lock up whenever I'm triggered, for example. And I found that when the same type of triggers were to come at me after this happened, I didn't have that same reaction. I didn't have that list of negative beliefs and feelings about myself anymore. So it was very strong confirmation that this system was working. And I used it over several months and over the course of years, and it's been extremely beneficial for me. It's something that I wanted to share with all of you because it's something that you can use to address those voids, obstacles, and shortages that are consistently coming back in your life. And you can get a better understanding as to why. What were the instances? What was the situations? Were you in a schoolyard where you were getting bullied by someone? Or possibly did you feel rejected by your peers? Or did something happen at home, perhaps where your parents were in an argument and you took all the blame onto you? And I mentioned that one because that's another thing it's another belief that I was holding about myself. And as I felt that as I was able to release these memories, all of a sudden I started to have a lot more energy, my posture about myself changed. And the amazing thing is that the circumstances in life or the coincidences started to work in my favor. And I realized that if I'm thinking back to that mirror principle, is that as I was healing that self-image, all of a sudden my reality around me started to change and things were leveling up for me. Now I use this with my clients as well, but not all of them are able to access those memories. So it could be a few things. It could be that you're just not in a relaxed enough state, or that the memories are too deep and you're not yet ready to unlock what those are. So if that's the case, go back to listening to the internal dialogue that's happening with you when you're triggered, write those things down and analyze them. And as you do that work, it typically opens the door for you to access more and more memories and beliefs about yourself that you're holding in there. And that'll hopefully get you to the point where you can walk inside that crown chakra or walk inside that dark hallway and find the light in there and go and heal those old wounds. And as you do that, you dissipate that very heavy negative energy that's been holding you down, that's been triggering you. And as I said, you will start to notice coincidences and synchronicities happening in your life that are a positive confirmation that this system is working for you. I still use it from time to time as I use it, but it's been very, very beneficial for me and a lot of the clients that I work with. And I hope that it's going to be of service to you and of benefit to you. Until next time, stay empowered. Thank you so much for joining me.